The goal of this presentation is to provide advice about the importance of using proper scientific language in a manuscript. It's important to take seriously the presentation of your manuscript, especially the language you use to communicate your results. Without clear and proper language, editors and reviewers will not grasp the full message or impact of your work. Even though the findings you report might be cutting edge, poor language quality, including errors in grammar, spelling, or language using, could delay publication or could lead to outright rejection of the paper, preventing the research from getting the recognition it deserves. Proper English should be used throughout the entire manuscript, including the captions and headings in figures, charts, graphs, and photos. Often, authors assume that the publisher or journal editor will correct the language of their manuscript either during the submission or after it has been accepted. But this is not correct. It is always the author's responsibility to make sure a paper is in the best form possible. Although publishers don't correct language, they do often provide resources for authors who are less familiar with the conventions of international journals. Please check www.elsevier.com/authors for more information. Sometimes, a technical screening service is also available prior to peer review. And if your paper's language quality doesn't meet a journal's minimum standards, it could be returned to you for improvement. All of Elsevier's manuscript improvement services are available on webshop.elsevier.com. The key to presenting your work well is to write clearly, objectively, accurately, and concisely. Native foreign language students should practice writing English at any moment they can, and even keep records in English during their research to practice their language skills. It's obvious that you should try to prevent spelling errors by using a spell checker in English. But the other most common language errors involve sentence construction, incorrect tenses, inaccurate grammar, inconsistent use of English throughout the paper. You should always read the Journal's Guide for Authors to check for any additional language specifications. To write a successful manuscript, first be aware of the sentence structure you use. Sentences should be constructed in short, factual bursts. Long and complicated sentences tend to confuse readers. Only one idea should be conveyed in each sentence, and multiple statements should not be included in one sentence. The average length of sentences in scientific writing is only about 12 to 17 words. You must also take care to use the proper tenses when describing your work and findings. The present tense should be used for known facts and hypotheses. For example, the average life of a honeybee is 6 weeks. The past tense should be used for describing experiments that have been conducted and the results of these experiments. For example, the average lifespan of bees in our contained environment was 8 weeks. Being consistent and correct in your use of tenses makes your paper easier to understand for the reader. Pay special attention to the grammar used in your manuscript. One way to help make the work and results clearer for the reader is by using the active rather than the passive voice. The passive voice can be used in the methods section of a paper, but otherwise, the active voice will usually shorten sentences and make them more dynamic and interesting for the reader. You are encouraged to use the active phrase, "We found that," freely, which is a quick signal to the reader that you are describing one of your results. This is also much more concise and to the point than writing in the passive voice, as in, for example, "It has been found that there had been." You should avoid contractions such as "it's," "isn't," or "weren't," which aren't often used in professional writing, and avoid abbreviations, except for very well-known ones, unless you have clearly defined them within the paper. You should minimize use of adverbs, eliminate redundant phrases, and double-check unfamiliar words or phrases. The purpose of publishing a manuscript is to communicate your message to the research community. If your manuscript is poorly written or presented in a way that makes its message unclear, there is a risk that reviewers, editors, and readers may not understand it. To ensure that your work is comprehensible, it is essential that you use proper English language with concise sentences, correct tenses, and correct grammar. Consult the journal's Guide for Authors for any additional specifications. We also recommend that you ask a native English-speaking colleague to help you edit the final version before submission, or take advantage of the language editing services available in Elsevier's web shop. Thank you for your attention.